Welcome to InterviewPro. Let's understand directives in Angular. A directive is a class that adds additional behavior to elements in Angular application. There are three types of directives in Angular: component, attribute, and structural. We have already seen component directive when we created our first component. @component is used for creating any component in Angular application. Basically, @component is the building block of Angular because this is how we implement features in our application. For example, app component is the main component. Inside component directive, we have given information about the HTML template for this component, the CSS styles, and the selector used to render this component. Then we saw attribute directives as well in our videos on class binding, style binding, and two-way binding. We used ngClass to add or remove classes dynamically. Then we used ngStyle to apply styles dynamically. And we have seen two-way binding to get data from the feedback form. If you missed any of these topics, please visit my playlist on Angular. I have provided links to these videos in the description as well. As we already covered component and attribute directives, let's see what structural directives are in this video. Structural directives are used to add or remove DOM elements and change the DOM layout. There are three structural directives: ngIf, ngSwitch, and ngFor. ngIf and ngSwitch change DOM layout conditionally, whereas ngFor is used to render elements in a loop. To understand the structural directives, let's implement a screen that looks like this. I have already created the videos component using ngGC command. The CLI has automatically created the HTML, TypeScript, CSS, and the spec file. Also, this videos component is added to app module as well. I have imported this videos component in the app component and commented the feedback component. In the videos TypeScript file, I have created an object called playlists with two arrays, one for the video titles in Angular playlist and the other for React.js playlist. I have a variable selected playlist that is set to Angular by default. In the HTML file, in this HTML file, I have created a drop-down to select the playlist. The options are Angular, React, and none. I used ng model to assign the selected value in the drop-down to the selected playlist variable and bind it back to the drop-down. This is called two-way binding, which we have already seen in the previous videos. Now, we need to display the list of videos for both Angular and React playlists. In the interest of time, I have already created the basic template and the styles are available in the CSS file. This is the UI. Now in place of video title, we need to display the actual title. We cannot hard code each and every title, so we need to loop through the strings inside the Angular array and React array. To render DOM elements repeatedly or in a loop, we use ngFor directive. We want to loop this div. So I'm adding ngFor directive to this div. Every structural directive starts with an asterisk. So star ngFor equal to, we need a loop variable. So let me create a loop variable. Let's say a variable name is video, followed by the keyword of, followed by the list. In our case, what is our list of items? It is playlists.angular. Playlists.angular. To understand this ngFor, let's try to compare this with the for loop in JavaScript. How do we write the for loop? If we have a list called videos, this is how we write the for loop, right? We'll have a loop variable followed by of keyword followed by the list through which we want to loop. Similarly, we have a variable here and also the list of items to loop. Now, to display the video title, we can make use of this video and bind it to the DOM using interpolation. Again, we discussed about interpolation in our previous videos. Now, let's save and see how this is rendered in the UI. If I come to the UI, Angular is selected by default. As of now, we don't have any logic related to this drop down, except the value is binded to the drop down. Now we see the list of videos in the Angular playlist. Let's do the same for React as well. Let's apply ngFor for React div. ngFor let video of playlists dot react, and we use interpolation to bind the variable video to the div. Now we see the list of videos in the React playlist as well. What if there are no items in the Angular array? Let's try that as well. I'll comment this and create an empty Angular array. Now if I go to the UI, we don't see any items under Angular playlist. Only the items for React are available. So just like for loop, if there are elements, it would loop through this through this list. Otherwise, it would simply ignore. When there is no data, the screen doesn't look good. Also, what is the point of displaying the data? So if we want to display this data only when the Angular array is available or Angular has data in the array, then we want to display this div, this complete div. Otherwise, we do not want to see this div. So what we can do is to render DOM elements conditionally, we can make use of ngIf directive. So I'll simply say ngIf. As I mentioned, structural directives would start with star. So ngIf equal to, what is our condition? Playlist dot angular should be available and playlists dot angular should have data. So dot length is 0. Now the array is empty, so we don't expect this div to be visible on the screen. Let's go to UI. Now I see only videos related to React playlist. Let's add the same condition to React as well, React div as well. Let me copy paste and update Angular with React. Now if we make React also as an empty array, then we don't see any of these playlists. Let's revert this change. Now we see both the playlists. Now I want to display these playlists based on the selection in drop-down. If I select React, I want to see the items related to React. If I select Angular, I want to see the videos related to Angular. Let's see how we can do that. In the code, so let me use ngSwitch because I want to switch between Angular and React. So what I will do is, these are the divs related to Angular and React. So this is one case and the second case is this div related to React. So what I will do is, to the parent of these two cases, I'll assign ngSwitch directive. Usually, when we talk about structural directives, we use asterisk. But in case of ngSwitch, the syntax is a bit different. So for ngSwitch, we use attribute binding. Now, what is the variable that I want to use for this switch? Selected playlist, because this is the variable that holds the value selected from the drop down. We have ngSwitch. Now we need to define the cases. Instead of ngIf, I want to use ngSwitch case. So for ngSwitch case, we use asterisk. ngSwitch case equal to, When do I want this div to be rendered? When selected playlist value is equal to Angular. And when do we want the second div to be rendered? When the selected playlist value is equal to React. So I'll remove this ngIf and replace it with ngSwitch case. Update this value to React. Okay, let's go back to UI. Now the default value for selected playlist is Angular. So we see only the videos list related to Angular. Now if I select React, we see the values of React. And what happens if I select none? We don't see anything, which is not good, right? So let's display something here when the selection is not Angular or React. So for that, if the options are other than Angular and React, we will go to a default case. So let me define another div here, which says playlist not available. This div will be displayed by default. That means when the option is not Angular or React, similar to the default case in normal switch. So the directive for the default case is ngSwitch default. Let's go back to UI. Now if I go to React, it would display React playlist. If I select none, the playlist is not available because the switch case doesn't match with Angular and React. So the default case would be applicable, which is playlist not available. So these are the different directives provided by Angular. I would recommend you to watch my previous videos to understand component directive and attribute directives. And I also want to discuss a few more points on structural directives, which we will be seeing in the next video. So I hope the concept is clear. If you like the content, please like, share, and subscribe to InterviewPro. Thank you.